All right, everyone, welcome to this PUD Commissioners meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the Republic
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So here we no consent agenda. Oh, then we're going to do audience comments first. All right. Do we have any audience comments? All right. And then online, I don't know, I got
look like.
Yeah, and the note just staff on there. My Zoom decided to reboot. Of course. All right. Well, in that case, we will move on to consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 3.
I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Manager's report.
All right.
George.
Thank you, commissioners. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Few things to update you on. We're having our quarterly all-staff meeting next week on June 17th. So topics that we'll cover include things like records retention and participation in our deferred comp program. And then, as always, a safety-related topic. This week on Thursday, I was asked to make a presentation for the SCOG Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, SEDS, the steering committee at the Port of Skagit on Thursday. So they want to learn more about the planning and operation of our water system as it relates to countywide infrastructure. So I was invited by Jill Boudreau, as the executive director, and be meeting over there at 4 o'clock on Thursday.
Is that a public meeting?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
If not, we don't have a representative on the SEDS committee.
Not on the
I don't
SEDS committee,
believe.
yeah.
So if I could attend, that would be great. If possible.
Check with Jill. Yeah, I'm not positive. I don't think it's been advertised as a public meeting, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
For the next meeting, our meeting on June 23rd, I'm going to be absent. I think Commissioner Miller is going to be absent as well.
So
We'll be at the AWWA ACE conference in Washington, D.C. Kurt Van Berkeley and Rob Sager are going to be making a presentation on our automated Gilligan valve project. And then Rob, Riley Smith, and Matt Walker are going to be competing in the Top Hops competition. So we'll be there to support them, cheer them on. And I want to address some things that are included in the information section of the packet. So I included 3 articles in the information section and just want to cover that with some comments. So there was recent news coverage of Skagit County's data center moratorium, including statements and quotes that I think may be confusing or misleading, including one suggesting that Skagit farmers already have a hard time getting the water they need. That framing doesn't quite accurately reflect the current water supply situation at Skagit PUD. So the purpose of my statement is to clarify the public record on a couple of points. The nature of the water constraint that farmers face, and then how Skagit PUD evaluates new water service requests from any applicant. So first, water availability. Recent news coverage described summer water availability for Skagit farmers as a shortage. And I don't think that description is accurate and requires clarification, as it implies that Skagit PUD water system struggles to deliver water to its customers in the summer. In reality, water supply is not an issue for Skagit PUD. We have an ample water supply available for all current and even new customers. Any new customer with a large water demand, whether industrial or commercial, can be confident that Skagit PUD has abundant water rights and treatment capacity to serve them. Some system improvements may be necessary to deliver large quantities of water to specific locations, but that's not a water availability issue. The actual issue of water availability is in the context of farming and agriculture is a legal constraint, not a supply problem. And our seasonal water rights transfer program, I think, directly addresses the actual issue. So just some facts regarding the water availability. Many agricultural water users in Skagit Valley hold interruptible water rights and are required to stop pumping when the Skagit River drops below the minimum in-stream flow established by the Washington State Department of Ecology. That's not a water supply problem. The constraint is legal. Farmers' junior water rights are subordinate to the in-stream flow rule, which limits their access to water. Skagit PUD obviously holds senior interruptible water rights. Our water rights transfer program provides a state-regulated mechanism for temporarily making a portion of those rights available to agricultural users during the low flow season, allowing them to legally pump when otherwise they could not. Typically, customers that require a large water demand are looking for a constant and uninterruptible water supply for their operations, and not a seasonal and temporary water right, such as what our water rights lease program will provide. So just to wrap that point up, water supply is not an issue for the PUD and any of its customers or potential customers. We have an ample water supply for all new customers. The second part of it that I want to address is how our process works for evaluating new customer requests. Skagit PUD has a standard evaluation process for any new water service requests, new construction, change of use, land division, or significant increase in water demand. That process applies equally to all applicants, regardless of industry type. So under that process, any applicant must submit a project description, site plan, water usage demands, and fire protection requirements to our engineering department before service can be confirmed. We evaluate things like water storage, transmission, and distribution to determine if project needs can be met. Any water system improvements required to serve the applicant are paid for by the applicant, not PUD ratepayers. In the case of extraordinary service conditions like large water demands, a special contract requiring commission approval is required, and service may only be provided if excess capacity is available in the district's distribution and source of supply facilities. That's in our water policy manual, section 2.2.3. So this process applies to all kinds of industry: data centers, food processing facilities, forest product companies, manufacturing plants. They all apply under the same process and under the same terms. We, Skagit PUD, are not involved in land use or permitting decisions. Our responsibility is to manage our water system reliably for the customers we serve. So there's two separate issues here: land use and utility capacity, and they're separate. The county's moratorium on data centers and Skagit PUD's water service evaluation process are two separate things. They operate under different legal authorities, serve different purposes, and answer different questions, and it's important to keep them distinct. The county's moratorium is a land use decision. It controls what can be built in an unincorporated Skagit County, and that is entirely within the county's planning and zoning authority. It does not involve Skagit PUD. Skagit PUD's water service evaluation is a utility capacity decision. It determines whether the PUD can reliably serve customers' water demand without compromising existing service. It's triggered by an application. It does not pre-screen by industry type and has nothing to do with whether a land use is desirable or appropriate for the county. I think recent coverage in the news conflated these two issues by suggesting that water scarcity is a reason to restrict data centers, effectively using the PUD's water supply as a rationale for a county land use decision. That's not an accurate characterization of how either system works. The county has its own authority to regulate land use, and the PUD has its own process to evaluate water service capacity. They're parallel, but they're independent. So just to be clear, the PUD does not have an opinion on data centers, nor does it object to the county's moratorium. I'm not commenting on whether it's the right policy decision. What I'm saying is that the PUD's water situation should not be cited as a driver of the moratorium. The water constraint farmers face is a legal one that the PUD's water rights transfer program actively addresses. And the PUD's water service evaluation process applies to all applicants on the same terms, regardless of industry. So I just want to make sure those 2 points are clearly on the record. The PUD has been working constructively with the agricultural community on the water rights transfer program for over a decade, and will continue to manage our water system to reliably serve our customers and the broader community. So the articles that are included in the packet aren't the only ones that were made available. Those are just the ones that I saw quickly that were local here and I wanted to address.
Was it more the news coverage that alluded to those conflicting issues, not necessarily the moratorium itself that alluded to that, or did the moratorium itself actually have?
It was more the
something rendered?
coverage and the quotes that were
Okay,
in the
I
articles.
just wanted to make sure that there wasn't conflicting information in the moratorium itself that alluded to those issues. More so just public perception.
Well, one of them was on the Skagit County website as the commission, not the moratorium wording itself, but it was a press release from the county
It
itself.
was their press release.
It was their
okay.
press release.
Okay.
So yeah, I think those comments can be confusing and misleading in that it's using a statement that a water supply issue is driving the moratorium, and those aren't linked. So
No.
just wanted to clarify those things. We're doing fine. We have
Yes, we
lots
do.
of water
We've
supply.
seen the numbers multiple times.
So just wanted to make that clear. But if there's any other questions about that or anything else, be happy to talk about that now. Okay,
Appreciate it.
and we can move on to operations department.
All right.
Afternoon, everybody. I'll keep this brief as well. I'm just going to kind of go over where we're at in the first half of the year in our budget cycle. We have some large asks of money outside of our capital program, just doing maintenance items and just kind of let us know where we're at. Don't really have to go line by line, but one thing to make note of, the very first one there, we're down to less than 100 registers to go finally. And those mostly are in vaults and take a two-man entry team. So we're slowly knocking those out here in the next month, and hopefully we'll finally get all the registers done. Plus, I think we're also waiting for some of the 1-inch registers to get here. And hopefully get that whole project finally done and behind us. The calibrating meter that we ordered showed up, and actually Matt today started testing our own hydrant meters. So he's kind of getting a handle on how the whole calibration system works. First year doing it ourselves, but meter showed up a week or two ago, and we're starting to calibrate our own hydrant meters, and we'll start going around and doing the large customer meters as well. The chlorine injection pumps, we're re-outfitting all our remote sites with new chlorine in each injectors, so that equipment has showed up and being installed. The DOH improvements at Eaglemont was completed. The next couple are just pots of money for just in case on pumps and PRV repairs. And then Morrow Mount generator, we're getting some pricing on putting a generator. We got one in Morrow Mount. We're looking at Skagit View Village next, I believe, and just trying to work it into the workflow. A couple of vehicles have arrived. We are still awaiting a couple more. Mainline meters, we're going with working with engineering on that as far as where to put and where to replace. There's some design work being done on that. Divers are showing up June 22nd. Potlatch, I missed one, Dukes Hill. That project is becoming bigger than we thought it was based on our electricity load up there. So that's going to be some money spent just kind of getting to a bigger design figure that will help back up Hoogdal Reservoir and the Cedar Woolley upper pressure zone up there in an emergency situation. Potlatch is 99.5% complete and ready for a tour if anybody wants to go out there. It's running automatic, couple flaws we still had to work out in the programming, but it's good to go. We're running good out there now. So if you want to make a trip, we can figure one out. Well replacement also, just a pot of money in case we need to put a new well pumper motor in, just contingency money. The flail mower we put in the budget is purchased, and we've already been using it for a month or two. It's been put in place. The water treatment plant electrical panels, I think I addressed that last time, or Casey had just completed those. So that project's done, and we have the load of anthracite filter media on board right now, and the treatment plant is currently going through filter maintenance right now with all the pressure washing and draining them down and the annual cycle of refurbing those. So as I said, there's less than 100 registers left in the meter program. Otherwise, most of the things that are going on right now are contractor tie-ins and developer projects, mowing, spraying, hydrants, valves, things that all happen in the summertime, building maintenance. Mostly stuff that just waits till warmer weather. Some pipeline projects coming up on Peterson Road, some things that Mark mentioned in the last meeting that we're all coordinating with. Again, the Potlatch RO is complete. Mentioned the maintenance at the filter plant, and again, just doing building repairs, and 'tis the season to catch up on all the stuff you can't do in the wintertime. So lots of different things going different directions at this point. Outside of that, kind of the same old thing every day for us. Keeping the water flowing and keeping the pond full. Pond's plumb full, as you can see there. It's over the intake tower. I think that point is like 463 or 464 right there, and right there lapping at the overflow. So we're doing good. If there's any questions other than that?
Even though it was really dry this leading up to this set of rain events, were we able to divert anything from Gilligan?
We haven't caught any this last weekend, I don't think. We'll see. I didn't look at today's to see if they captured any last night or not, but I think with just a sudden burst like that, we might have got a little bit during the night, but probably not a whole lot. Squeeze out what we can when we can.
Yep.
That's it.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I try sharing? Got to make sure they're on both screens. All right, ready for the next one.
So are we.
All right. The water rights lease program, back to that. Last week, we went into some detail about the operational considerations that we think about on a day-to-day basis as we operate the SRD and the reservoir. Today, we're going to talk about some of the regulatory considerations regarding water rights and what things that we think we need to be aware of as we consider our water rights lease program. So tonight, Dan Haller is here to lead us through that conversation. Dan's a senior principal water resources engineer for GeoSyntec Consultants and has more than 25 years of experience focused on water rights and water system management. Dan has worked with Skagit PUD for many years and is currently working on optimizing and perfecting our water rights portfolio. Dan prepared the memo that's included in the meeting packet, which is meant to address some of the questions and comments that have come up in our discussions over the last couple of months. So that's where the Q&A populates the memo. And tonight, please use this as an opportunity to ask Dan any questions that you might have about our water rights or his experience in working with other districts or other transfer programs. Dan has a wealth of experience in that area. And just for some perspective, so as a reminder, just like last week when we talked about operations, tonight's memo and the conversation doesn't make any recommendations. It's not intended for us to come to any kind of decision tonight. It's just meant to provide context and regulatory perspective on some of the issues that we will discuss later as we work our way through the process of developing the policy and the program. So as we get into it, here's Dan. And I'll just move the memo along as we get to different areas.
Thanks, George, and hello, commissioners. Nice to be here with you all today. So I've been doing this a long time, and hopefully what I'm going to share with you guys will help give you some guidance over how you want to take this program in the future. My plan was to review some of the content in the memo over about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can really dive deeper into any questions and answers you have. But if you have something burning, please feel free to jump in at any time, and I'm happy to answer it. So I was in attendance remotely on the presentation that George and Bill gave a couple weeks ago. And so this is really looking to kind of build off of that foundation and then start to answer some of the questions that have come up over time. So I'm going to start by just kind of reminding you in big numbers of the quantities that we're dealing with. And actually, if you want to go to page 2, there's a good table here that you've seen before. And this is a summary of your water rights from the Cultus Mountain Springs and then the Skagit River diversion. And you have approximately 40 CFS that is kind of the overall quantity. And some of the choices that you've made in the past and will make in the future is how to safely and appropriately allocate that to a number of competing uses. Your existing customers, those that may come over time, and those that may be participating in your lease program. Let's go to the next page. Actually, there is a point on here I want to reiterate that's underlined just above the table. One of the things that is, I think, important as we consider your program over time is this 40 CFS authority you have is a zero-sum game. Absent you acquiring additional water rights or developing additional water supply that comes with water rights, that's what you have to work with. So necessarily, as you grow into those water rights over time, as you hook up new houses, new businesses, that will come at the cost of other opportunities, including the lease program. So the lease program has been a good local choice in the interim, but at some point, as you continue to grow, if everything stays the same, then that opportunity will necessarily need to shrink. Let's go to the next page. So this table is intended to just kind of provide a summary of what I described in the previous underlined statement, which is for 2026, here are some numbers that show how allocations could work. And you've got that 40.1 is the fixed quantity from your water rights at the bottom. The amount that has been allocated to your or planned for the Skagit River diversion is about 11 CFS. And again, as if you think about what is happening in the PUD next year and the year after that and the year after that, that number will grow over time. And then similarly, in the second row, you have the quantity that's allocated to the transfer recipients, which is currently estimated in the table at about 13 CFS. And that number, 5 years, 10 years down the road, would necessarily need to likely shrink over time, all of the things being equal. So if you add those two up, you got about 24, 25 CFS. That's the sum of those two factors. And then you have a quantity of water, about 15 CFS, that is not currently allocated to either of those two columns. And you have some choices there. There are quantities in the past, in the previous decade, that you have allocated to the lease program that have been higher, and you could make some choices about that. You could also hold those quantities for future growth. So there is some flexibility and some policy choices that you can make about where you want this program to go. One important distinction that I want to make in the next paragraph is coming back to some kind of nerdy water right terms that are nonetheless important as you think about program options moving forward. Is this contrast between inchoate or unperfected quantities and perfected quantities. Now you have pumps that can supply the instantaneous rates that are shown in the table, but you have an annual quantity that you're growing into over time. And this has been the subject of the 2003 municipal water law. There's some case law on this, and we can talk further about what those differences mean. So now I'm going to transition into some of what we call kind of these frequently asked questions that may have come up in previous discussions, both with you and with staff. And this isn't by any means intended to be an exhaustive list. There may be other questions that this prompts, and I'm happy to do a version 2.0 of this if it helps down the road. But at least it should help hopefully engender some discussion as we continue to think about this. So the first thing I'd like to introduce are there's some of these terms of art that are used in the business practice that you guys are involved in. Sometimes it's called water banking. Sometimes it's a lease program. Sometimes it's a mitigation program. Sometimes it's water marketing. Sometimes these things mean different things to different people. And in fact, before about 2010 or so, until really the Kittitas County case came out, a lot of these terms were really not in widespread use in the state. Now we have between 50 and 80 active water banks or water markets going on all around the state. So it's become much more common. And I guess if there's any comfort as you guys think about this, is you're not having to reinvent or necessarily even pioneer anything that hasn't already been done in the state. I can give you good examples in PUD government, irrigation district government, city government, county government about all of the issues you're facing. Fortunately, many of other folks have kind of been there before and blazed a trail. And what I think you can be focused on is what's right locally for the PUD, and maybe pick and choose to develop your program in a way that makes sense for your customer base. So with that as a backdrop, what I'd like to say in this question number one is what you have been doing historically is running a very small lease program. The first question is, if you wanted to do what's called water banking, why would you do that and what really is involved there? So water banking is a statutory construct where you enter into an agreement with the Department of Ecology to use what's called their Trust Water Program to manage, to co-manage this program with you. It's a much more formalized process, and it is more commonly used when you have a lot more customers, because there's efficiency in water banks that come with multiple transactions that that don't necessarily lend themselves to a smaller customer base. So if you think about folks that came out of the Hearst case and had exempt well mitigation responsibilities, they're dealing with dozens or hundreds of transactions a year. And so the efficiency of a water bank makes those transactions work a lot better than trying to do individual transfers for every single one. So there's a scale and a size issue here that has driven some people to water banking, and others have stayed away from it. Question two is, if you'd scroll down, thanks, George, to page 4. Question 2 is around the purposes of what your lease program can be. You have municipal water rights, and ecology and the legislature have defined what those municipal water rights are. But before 2003, ironically, there was no definition of municipal water supply. The legislature it was referenced in the statute since 1967. But then for the next 50 years, it went undefined until the 2003 municipal water law. And then they wrote a super complicated definition about what municipal actually means. But your water rights are municipal. Ecology has developed 3 different incarnations of their municipal water law policy that further adds clarity. It's like 25 pages long. So you took a statute that's about a half page in length, and then you wrote 25 pages of policy around further explaining it. So just giving you some sense that it's a super complicated issue. In particular, you guys have been focused on an ag lease program. And so the natural question is agricultural irrigation part of the municipal family of water rights? And what Ecology's policy says is, well, kinda. If it's part of your charter, if it's part of what you have historically used your water rights for, then to a limited extent, yes, agricultural irrigation can be subsumed under the municipal family of rights. So can dairy, which was the other particular purpose that they called out. However, they said that this is generally limited, and that in most cases, they believe those are different purposes of use. So you're already, I would say, in the margins or in the gray area. It's not been well litigated. It's not like there's an agricultural irrigation versus municipal irrigation versus municipal use Supreme Court case. That doesn't exist yet. Someone may litigate on that in the future. But to date, what we can say is you have had Ecology's blessing that what you're doing is on the up and up. They've approved a number of transfers for this use historically, and you directly serve some customers that are like that just directly from your pipe utility as well. Moving on to question 3 on the next page. Another question that arose is whether you can entertain brand new customers or whether they already need to have their own existing water rights that you're essentially drought proofing or making or improving the reliability on. And the answer is no. Statutorily, they don't need to have their own water right. They could, for the first time, be served under your program. So you can do both. You have flexibility there. What I would say is that it's our understanding that Ecology prefers a framework where they do have existing water rights that you're simply improving the reliability on. I think that is, I would say, more in the fair way than in the rough. But that doesn't mean that you're precluded from that option either. Question.
We could require somebody in this program to have their own junior water right.
You could. Yes. Question 4 is, it gets at this a little bit, which is generally what Ecology believes is that there needs to be an appropriate matching of supply and demand. And that is especially true when you're doing lease water. The classic example is both Ecology and the Department of Health have opined publicly that it would be inappropriate for new houses to be built based on lease supplies, because in the event those lease supplies get reappropriated to something else, then those houses become a compliance problem for Ecology to wrestle with. That could be extended to permanent crops too. For example, we have seen, I think, pushback that if permanent uses of any kind, agricultural, industrial, domestic, are being planned on temporary water supplies, then there needs to be a real clear articulation of what happens when those temporary supplies go away. So I think that the best scenario with temporary supplies is temporary uses with clear expectations and communication around the term of that relationship and what happens, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, so that those expectations aren't unmet, and then relationships suffer. There are some interesting statutory constructions around when Ecology actually gets to care about these things, because generally there's 4 tests under the water code. Impairment is kind of the big one. You can't do harm to others. The other one is public interest, and it is usually in the public interest test that I would say somewhat more squishy things like these concerns get find a home. But perversely, the public interest test does not apply to surface-to-surface transfers. It only applies if the groundwater code is involved or the trust water program is involved. So if you were doing a surface transfer to a permanent blueberry grower and they were doing surface-to-surface, while Ecology may feel, oh, that feels really inappropriate to do that, what happens if those temporary supplies goes away? They may not actually have a regulatory hook to say no. Conversely, if that blueberry grower was using a well, they could say, no, we're not going to approve that transfer. So details matter in the water code. So then at the bottom of this page is question 5. I'm almost done, and then we'll open it up to questions. Is can Ecology approve multi-year transfers? To date, what you have been working on is the seasonal transfer program. And the short answer is yes, they can. There's a variety of ways that that you could build a multi-year program other than truly forming a water bank. You could take steps towards water banking without forming a water bank. So bank with a big B versus little b, if you will. And one way is you could enter into, instead of a 1-year seasonal transfer, you could do a 3-year or a 5-year or a 10-year transfer to test out a more long-term relationship. There are other permitting vehicles where that could be done as well. But those are all options. Question 6 just gets at, I would say, program considerations, which is there risk for the PUD in limiting who can participate in future temporary transfers? The PUD is a public entity, you have public assets. And so I think it is healthy as you have been doing this pilot and as you think about what you want this program to be at year 5 and year 10, is to do some introspection about what customer base and what goals you're trying to serve. And you might think about it in 2 different ways, which is one, how much, I would say, sweat equity does it take to run a program when this really isn't your core business function? This is, another function that's being added. So there's an administrative burden to running a program. Okay. And you should look through the lens of what that means and whether you're going to shrink it, grow it, or keep it the same size. And then the other side of this is what values are you trying to satisfy when you are creating this kind of program? If you look at the number of different programs that other utilities are doing, I would say they generally fall into 3 categories. Category 1 is what I would say limited access, where you have to meet some very stringent criteria to access water. So an example of this might be the Methow Valley Irrigation District Water Bank. Unless you're a Methow Valley Irrigation District customer, you can't participate in that. So I can't go just buy a house and say, can I have some water? I'm not an MVID member. I'm not assessed by the district. It's a closed bank limited to that membership. Okay. And the next criteria would be, I would say, limited open. Okay. And what I mean by that is it's open to the public, but only if you meet certain qualifications. And the classic example there would be the way many counties are running exempt well mitigation programs required by the Hearst case and RCW 9094. You can participate at the county level in accessing surplus water, but only if you want to build a rural house. If you want to build any other thing, you may not be able to access the water. So limited, open, but limited, first come, first serve, but you have to qualify for a very specific goal that they are trying to achieve. Okay. And then the last category would be complete open architecture bank, right? And so an example of this might be something like TransAlta Water Bank or Selamoxie Irrigation District's Water Bank, where it's just first come, first serve. They're not picking winners and losers around who can access that water. And they have a different mindset about what the revenue from that program is trying to do. In many cases, what it's trying to do is hold down the cost of service for the existing members through an additional revenue stream. So part of what I think you guys should think about is what problem are you trying to solve and how best to solve it?
Quick question, just a clarification on question 6 is, so are you saying that it wouldn't necessarily be unlawful for us to say the issue that we're trying to resolve here or address is that a certain group of people were left out of an agreement, and essentially we're trying to be the patch there and saying, okay, we're going to address the ag water issue, limiting to district supported irrigation. That's not unlawful of us.
So I will be a little bit careful about the issues of legality, and you've got counsel here. But what I can say is other utilities have made those choices and have been and felt they're on solid ground to make those discernments. They've done it in a public way, and they've adopted it in code or in water policy or whatever to be clear about what those expectations are. But to my knowledge, that has been a safe practice if the steps are appropriately followed.
Yeah, robust goal setting and then policy setting after that. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm going to talk briefly then about the last couple pages here, which are some of the future program options. And this gets to more on not what you're doing, but how you're doing it. Okay. So when you decide this is what we want to do for the next X years or forever, then the question becomes how best do you execute that? Okay. So the status quo is you could just keep doing seasonal transfers. And as long as the universe of recipients is small, then that may be a perfectly acceptable method to keep doing. The administrative burden on staff is low, and ecology is very comfortable with that. They've been timely. So there's a number of pros and cons around this that there's nothing, I would just say there's nothing wrong with the model that you have chosen to date. And if it's meeting your needs, you could stay with that. Number two is what I would say a step towards water banking, little b, without doing water banking. And it is using other permitting vehicles to avoid the repetition of seasonal transfers and gain some efficiency across a multi-year relationship. Okay. And I've provided three different scenarios that have been used in other cases. One's called a large area permit model, which just means that the recipients that you are leasing that water to now would apply for their own permit that would then be backed by contracts that you would enter every year. So right now, you're the ones transferring the water right. There's another model where they could apply for a permit that then gets hydrated by contracts with you. Chelan County has one of these, for example. So does Kittitas County. Another one would be to do the exact same thing you're doing with these recipients, but just don't do it every year seasonally. Do it across a multiple year term, 3 years, 5 years, whatever that is negotiated. And the last choice would be what I would call a permanent change model, which is right now, those lessees that you're working with, those diversions are not authorized under your water rights in anything other than a temporary fashion. You could simply add those as permanent diversions to your water rights, and then you would enter in, they would become permanent customers with you, and then you would decide in any given year through contracting vehicles how much water would apply, but you wouldn't necessarily have to redo through ecology the permitting steps over and over and over again. So there's a number of ways you could step towards a more long-term relationship if that was of interest. So moving down, water bank, as I say, water bank is what I would describe as the most structured end game. So if you wanted to greatly expand the number of recipients that were going to participate in this program, that's where the advantages of a water bank has proven itself to be the case with other utilities. So if you went from 4 to 40, then there are some efficiency issues that might manifest themselves in a water bank. So I'm going to stop there. I know that was, I'm not sure if I hit my 10-minute mark or not, but I'm happy to talk to you about any of these ideas, give you examples of what other folks are doing. How can I help?
You got anything?
I don't. I was just happy to hear a few of your comments,
Yeah.
though, that we can restrict, us to certain uses, and we can require, I think, somebody already having a water right that we're trying to fill a need for. So
I think the biggest thing that I'm hearing from this is that we need to ensure that we have very straightforward goal setting, like to establish this as a very first step, because this provides a lot of framework, but you don't know which direction you want to go unless you've already determined what goals you're trying to accomplish. And then from there, being able to structure a policy that makes sure that those goals are met and protects the utility and our primary focus, which is serving our piped customers. So
I think that's right. I think that almost every utility that has started down this path has tried to wrestle with the decision of whether they're going to be a buffet and be everything to everyone, or if they're just going to be you get to order off the menu and this is what we're providing. And so that clear goal setting has been a critical part of every utility's creation of these programs.
definitely. I guess any suggestion, it would be really great to see examples that, if there are any other entities that have done similar to what we've done on the obviously drought has become a major issue for a lot of us. And this is probably how these programs have morphed to what they have become. And as complex as some of them may be, if there are any other entities that have kind of gone through that metamorphosis that we can kind of see, and maybe from as commissioners, like, where did they go well? Like, what goals were they setting? And, who were their constituents? And so that we can learn from maybe their mistakes or their successes as well.
Yeah, Bill and I were just talking about this in prep for this. We do have a good library of examples that you can draw from and then figure out, well, I'm kind of closer to what these guys are doing, and I'm really not what these guys are doing.
Exactly.
And I guess that's what's great about doing this in 2026 as opposed to 2006 is you have dozens of other utilities that have grappled with this and come out the other side. And so there's a place here for you to be as big or as small as you want this program to be and to feel like you're not alone.
Yeah. And I think being able to look at some of their current policies themselves and being able to kind of digest that a little bit and say, like you said, I definitely resonate with this, but this is not the direction I feel like what we're trying to solve. This is outside of that. So
We can work with staff to get you that.
So of the options that are here, which of these has the least amount of touches with ecology? My biggest concern in the room is that someone in Olympia could blow this up, not understanding the context of what we're trying to do or the impact on our community. And so, I believe that everybody in ecology has their best interest in mind. My concern is being able to control what we can't control.
Yeah.
So help us avoid touches with ecology.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that the option right before water bank, which was number 2, which talks about moving away from a seasonal transfer program into something that has fewer touches and over a longer term. As long as you feel comfortable with that relationship over a longer term, there's no reason why you couldn't gain some efficiency in the short term and say, well, we're just going to do one for the next X years. We don't need to keep giving ecology a touch every single year. So I think moving towards some kind of model where number 2 is effectuated, it would accomplish that.
And on that one, do they have to then? Was that the one where they applied for their permit? Was that a pass-through permit or?
It could be. So number 2 really subsumes 3 different permitting choices, but all of them have that same commonality, that same common goal you're talking about, which is let's move out of a annual touch into a more multi-year or permanent touch. And then there's some pros and cons within each of those about which one's best for you guys. But at its simplest state, for example, if you have a long-term customer that you've already been in a relationship with since 2015, and you're pretty sure you're not going to need those supplies that you have been leasing for the next 5 years, you could say, well, maybe a step in that direction could be a 5-year one-time transfer instead of 5 one-time transfers. That's 4 times fewer that ecology would touch that water right, assuming ecology could approve that and it met the statutory.
Yeah, that was ding. So they would have to approve it for 5 years. Ecology is going to get a say, but they're only going to get one say for the whole agreement.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And Dan, in one of these versions, you were talking about how if we did that multi-year agreement, then it's just a matter of the recipient getting the contract with us to supply them. Does that get reviewed or what's the process for that?
So there would be a reporting element to that. So the way that is typically worked, which is either under the large area permit model or where you're permanently adding that diversion, ecology needs to know, because they're turning for those that have an existing interruptible water right, they need to know that if that person keeps pumping, that they're not just illegal, right? And so there would have to be a notice process, but that is a different process than requiring serial approvals from ecology. And so where this has been successful and could be done is to say, well, we got a metering program. We're going to contract in any given year for X CFS when the flows aren't met. We're going to provide notice to ecology that that's what is available this year. The point of diversion's already been approved either through a multi-year transfer or a permanent transfer. It seems like that, and again, a lot of what I'm saying here would need some ecology input and consultation as you try to ripen the program, but I have seen that be successful in other instances.
So the transfer itself is almost exactly the same in which we've been doing, but it would just have like a 5-year stipulation on it. And then we would just be more so like we have been doing is renewing our leasee agreement. Which we kind of did it backwards, right? We had a leasee agreement of 3 years, and then we were submitting an annual transfer, right? So we're doing it.
Correct. The tests are the same under the water code. irrespective of the term.
Okay.
So you can't impair, can't be detrimental to the public interest. Water's got to be available. It's got to be a beneficial use. Those all have to be satisfied regardless of whether you're doing it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years.
Sure.
So that would bias towards, if you have a mature relationship that you want to keep advancing, that you've already piloted over a number of decades, you could move towards that model to gain some efficiency and lower staff burden.
And then I did have a question in regards to the amounts when you were discussing the incoherent versus perfected rights and how the unallocated senior right over time will go down. I know that we're talking instantaneous versus total amount, right? But are we saying that unallocated right that we have been saying that we're turning that one pump off for to do our own, I guess, mitigation, that's still on the table to be serving as potential growth for the future for our own system? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think there are, there's what's allowable under the water code, and then there's what you have agreed to through agreements with other entities and stakeholders. Under the water code, yes, you have that's your authority.
Gotcha. Thank you. I think you're not on your right.
Here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
You hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, I think
I was just going to add, I think also it's just reinforcing the broad philosophy that the needs for the SRD and the pump station are going to get larger over time as the system grows. So that's the summary story that's being told here on how those components either increase or decrease with that growth of the system.
And then we would just, I mean, that's something that we could easily write. If we did a 5-year agreement or we did a multi-year agreement, we could have some sort of analysis or like review that happens on an annual to ensure that we have enough, like our supply hasn't, or our demand hasn't changed statistically significantly within the last so many years.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point too that there's two parts. There's the ecology authorization, and then there's our agreement that you've talked about. And similar to the year to years, this option would be multiple year, but you still have authority on our end to have whatever parameters, whether it's year to year check-ins, and we've talked about there's a variety of options for that latitude on our end.
Yeah, I can give you a specific example of this because there are relief valves that your attorney can help negotiate here. So an example of this would be the Port of Walla Walla lease program that is entered into with the Department of Ecology. Port of Walla Walla had some big poplar farm and customers that went away, created a bunch of surplus, but they were looking to attract new businesses over time, but they had this surplus in the perfected surplus in the interim. So they entered into an agreement with the Department of Ecology to lease that water out to customers that could meet the limited nature of that use. And it was a year-to-year program only. And with notice, Walla Walla could pull all unallocated water back with 1 year's notice. So they could, if it was in season, they couldn't pull it back. But before the next set of year contracts were allocated, they could say, our industrial customer came to town, we're taking all our water back. So there are a lot of details around those agreements that could set the framework for ensuring that if you're entering into a long-term agreement where there's some uncertainty about that sometimes I call them clawback provisions that allow you to gain some confidence that you can still adapt to things that you don't know.
This has answered some questions, but also added a lot. I think having examples of other policies and kind of, as I said, how they handled, from start to finish, I think it'd be really interesting to see. But I already know kind of where I'm hoping. Keep it simple. I always say that's my favorite philosophy.
I'll work with Bill and George to get that for you.
Great. Thank you. And then I think something that I am like an action item for us is discussing why are we here at this table having this conversation and what are our goals? What are we trying to address in the near and long term, or pseudo long term? I wouldn't say the forever term. with this program. So,
Yeah, our process that we talked about was to get to the policy draft and the policy goal, but after we kind of lay the foundation and even then have the stakeholder meeting, gather that input from the local public community, and then work. Okay, now what's, we've heard all this. Now let's develop that goal. Didn't want to start with the goal,
yeah.
I think people have an idea what the goal is, but still hearing from everybody, I think is valuable. So that is part of the process. Everybody's gears are turning, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is,
A lot
is-
more reading coming up.
yeah, is there anyone that has, from a like a PUD perspective, that's done a water priority policy that you've seen be successful? I guess I have two concerns, kind of piles of concern. One is ecology. So basically the administrative evil, and then the courts, which is the main source of administrative evil, right? So those are the two lenses that I try to protect things from. So in my mind, that would be useful. But have you seen that work, and how did it work?
Yeah, in most instances, utilities that are doing this are prioritizing by purpose, necessarily because of the litigation risk that came out of that. So by far, the majority of utilities that are doing stuff in this space are mitigating for rural exempt wells. That's the bread and butter, because that's what came out of 10 Supreme Court cases, starting with Campbell and Gwynn in 2001. There are others, though, that have made decisions about, I would say, the other thing, like these are things that we don't want to fund. And it could be marijuana, for example. There are some banks that say we're just not going to do those kinds of things. And then you got everything in between.
Even if it's a legal use.
I think
Like that is a lawful business, and they're saying that they can, because as I understand the law, we're not allowed to not send water to a legal business.
So are dairies, for example. So are other businesses. I think you and utilities like you can choose what local values you are trying to accentuate or what needs you're going to meet. And I think as long as it's in a public process, that it's well informed and then it's well documented. It's not arbitrary. It's not capricious. It's not speculative. All those pejorative terms. There are a lot of examples of utilities that provide one lane. And if you fit in the lane, you get to drive there. If you're outside that lane, it doesn't mean that you can't exist. It just means you have to self-solve with someone else's water, not the water that we're providing. And so I think there's a lot of examples where things could be chosen and are left for others to solve.
Yeah, I'd say my biggest concern is that, as I sit here and as I understand my fellow commissioners, is that we hope to, especially with the untreated water, prioritize ag use. My concern is that someone will come in and say, well, that's cool for you, but now I want some and I'm going to sue you because you didn't go about it right. And so part of this process is us getting that right so that we don't go backwards or create litigation risk for the district here, what we're trying to do. So those are some of that's the process. I've beat up about it. And I'm asking you, it's just a matter of how do we insulate from hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees to try to do what we as a commission want to do, especially as it pertains to it. Because the corollary in my mind is if we're not allowed to withhold water from a legal purpose, a business is performing a legal purpose for piped water, is the court going to turn around and say the exact same thing for unpiped water? And if so, then we've got some work to do on the other end.
What I would encourage you and Pete to do, and we can bring this out through the examples too, is to look at how the law treats surplus assets. Water rights are real property. So it's really no difference than the truck in your fleet. Okay, it's real property, and there's a process for declaring things surplus. So I'll give you an example. Sealabox Irrigation District, one of my clients, created a bunch of water through conservation and crop change, right? And when we look to market that water to solve problems locally, the first thing they had to do is go through a very formal process where they declared that water surplus, at least for the time period until it was, needed in the future. But they went through a surplus water process. And then once they had been through that, then they very clearly articulated in their code, who had access to the water. They had public meetings, So I think process matters on these kinds of issues. But I guess what I would just say is, given the number of folks that have already skinned this cat and haven't been litigated against, and we're all represented by capable attorneys, I would hope that standing on their shoulders gives you some comfort on this effort.
And I feel like the process that we're engaging in right now is exactly that public. I mean, we're engaging in a public process, hearing stakeholders' needs, concerns, and then, we have history as of 2015, dating back from 2015 regarding, I guess, or pointing out more so the issue that keeps getting brought to us by the same group.
Yeah.
It's
building a record around it.
Right. No, that's the reason.
Yeah.
Every time we talk about it, right, that's the raise and dismiss. Yes, we talked about it. No, it doesn't fit within, like you said, here's the road, here are the parameters. We want to prioritize ag within.
And here's why.
And here's exactly.
Here
here's
was
the why,
the
and here's
issue.
all the effort that went in. And I love that. And I want that for us. I don't want some obscure case out of Wyoming, because we it hasn't been litigated. And if it does, it's going to happen in Skagit, or it's going to happen in the Nooksack, right? Where it's yeah. And that's my biggest concern, is that someone or a party could decide to make it something. And as long as that's why we're inching along, frankly, in my, opinion, it feels like we're going super slow. It feels like we're raising, but it's a raise and dismiss issue for me. That, yes, we've talked about it. That is the issue for me. If we can't not sell to, if we're forced to sell to every legal business on the piped side, help me understand how it's different on the unpiped side. And I am sure that's the case. I just want to know it as a commissioner so that we can make policy accordingly. Because if it's not, then how do we get there? That's the next question. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. What else? This has been fantastic. I do appreciate it. Yeah.
Nothing for me.
It'll happen when I'm driving home. So that's what email's for, I guess.
Yeah, feel free to email.
Sure.
It's always a good way to address things.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Very, very
well
much.
done.
Very, very insightful.
Thank you.
Yes, but feel free to read through the memo again. I'm sure this did probably bring up other questions that maybe you just need some time to articulate and write down, and feel free to email me if you get some of those. Just going back to our schedule. So I always want to make sure I put in the updated meeting schedule in the packet. So we are not planning to have a discussion at the next meeting. Both Commissioner Miller and I will be away. So our next meeting is that we're going to discuss this is going to be on July 14th. And my thought so far, we may bring up, maybe if we have some examples or other things to share at that meeting, we can bring those up at that time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I really would like to better understand the different forms of a longer term. I mean, I just really want to pick through more so the examples from other utilities, because up until now, really haven't had other utilities to look at when it comes to some of this, and kind of look into their policy and policy setting procedures to, when we do start engaging with stakeholders, to really be able to guide that in a meaningful way. So
Agreed.
I think that, I would really just like to dive deeper into the options and like case study, I guess, of what has been brought in front of us, especially when it comes to the multi-year and the closed group concerns, and how did they address those issues as utilities as well. I think those are all important.
So between now and then, we'll get as much information as you can. And if we're ready to put that up for the meeting, then we'll do that. Alongside that, even if we do that, I think that's maybe the time to start the preparation for a stakeholder meeting. Mm-hmm. So that was the other thing that we need to start working on. I have it that the week after that was going to be the stakeholder meeting. I don't think that's possible. I think that's not enough time. I think we need some time to prep for that. So on the 14th, we can start beginning that prep, which would be, looking at who we would invite and then the questions or how we're going to conduct the stakeholder meeting, the questions and communication with them. So that's something I was planning to start on the 14th of July as well. So obviously that pushes the stakeholder meeting out further. I don't know how far. Maybe at the 14th meeting, we can kind of look at where we're at and adjust the schedule based on that. I am planning to have a third party act as the meeting facilitator for the stakeholder meeting, just so I don't have to do it. And they'll help coordinate all the communication with the stakeholders, just so it's, a neutral third party, just so it's independent. And we should have them on board before the 14th meeting, and hopefully they can participate in that as well.
And then I guess this is kind of cart before horse, just the idea of sending like overall questions. Because it sounds like when it comes to these issues is making sure that we really are establishing what the issue we are solving is. And making sure that we are even aware of what the issue that we're trying to patch or solve is. So maybe even like that question going out to the stakeholders as like, for your comment, we really want to have the discussion surrounding this topic at this meeting.
The one thing we have so far is that executive summary. So as I've been talking to people, it's on the website. I think Kevin put it up there. So that's the one thing I've been using so far to introduce this topic. So as we reach out to stakeholders, if we still want to use that to introduce it, we can. And then there would be whatever we decide we want to communicate in addition to that.
And even like our current understanding of the issue, like this is how we currently have understood the issue that we've been trying to solve through these actions. Please provide us comment if we are misinformed or if there's a larger issue at hand. But
I think there's a wide variety of questions or statements we could make and send out and solicit written communication, invite them personally. Not everybody will probably be able to make it to the meeting, so we need to figure that out. There's some prep to do. That's why I'm saying
that's
the stakeholder meeting,
excellent.
I think, is going to get pushed out.
Agreed.
So I'll start adding dates to this as we get into August and September. But that's the plan so far for the 14th meeting.
All right. Good.
Good so far? Okay.
Yep. All right. Oh, I see no new business. I'll take it.
Correct.
Appreciate all the information, especially a full reservoir.
Yeah.
And news articles there. Commissioner comments.
No.
I sat in on the PERMS meeting, not much to report because they pretty much just talked about the risk side for property insurance. So not much on the health side. So.
Okay.
I did have conversations with a couple of the county commissioners regarding the moratorium, and that's something that again, one of the reasons that George was able to unpack what he was just between that and some stakeholder sessions that people reached out to me about that. The question was, what can be done at the PUD to make sure that we don't have data centers in our community? And that's why I asked George to help unpack what options are, for the commission, things we can, things we can't do. And so appreciate the dialogue again, the commissioners, the county commissioners leaning into something that is of high, it's on the minds of a lot of people in our community. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate that it is on the PUD has taken a look at it and it's not reactive. We're doing what we can, right, to position the district and our community to roll with whatever punches as it comes to the high volume, potential high volume. Not that there is one, but I thought that was interesting. Appreciated the conversations there. Great. Well, since we're done with that, now we can move on to adjourn. No, head into an executive session, discuss potential litigation for RCW 4230-110-1I for
6 o'clock
till 6 o'clock.